Sarah Chen adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses for the 100th time that morning as she stepped off the bus at the military training facility. The other recruits were already gathering in small groups, their voices echoing across the courtyard. She clutched her duffel bag tighter, feeling the weight of everyone's stares. "Look at Four Eyes over there," whispered Jake, a tall recruit with perfectly styled hair. "Bet she can't even see the targets, let alone hit them." The group around him snickered, their laughter cutting through the morning air like broken glass. Sarah had heard it all before. Throughout high school, during her brief stint at college, and now here at the elite military training program she had fought so hard to enter, her thick glasses had been the subject of countless jokes. The reason she was always picked last for team sports, the barrier that made others assume she was weak before they even knew her name. She found an empty bench near the registration table and sat down quietly, watching as the other trainees showed off their athletic builds and shared stories of their sporting achievements. Most of them looked like they had stepped out of fitness magazines, all muscle and confidence. Sarah, with her slight frame and bookish appearance, felt like she had wandered into the wrong place. "Did you see her trying to fill out the physical assessment form?" Another trainee named Marcus laughed. "She had to hold it 2 inches from her face just to read it." "This is going to be hilarious." The registration officer called for attention, his voice booming across the courtyard. "Welcome to the most challenging military training program in the country. Over the next 12 weeks, you will be pushed beyond your limits. Many of you will not make it to the end." Sarah listened intently as he explained the various challenges they would face: physical endurance tests, marksmanship training, tactical exercises, and the ultimate test, a grueling mountain elimination course that had broken even the most seasoned soldiers. The other trainees shifted nervously, but Sarah remained perfectly still, absorbing every word. "The mountain course is legendary," the officer continued. "It's conducted at 4,600 meters above sea level, where the air is thin and the conditions are brutal. Only the strongest, smartest, and most determined survive. Those who complete it join an elite group that serves our nation's most critical missions." After the briefing, Sarah made her way to the dormitory, overhearing more whispered comments about her appearance. Her roommate Lisa seemed friendly enough, but clearly had doubts about Sarah's capabilities. "So what made you want to join this program?" Lisa asked, genuinely curious but with a hint of skepticism in her voice. "I want to serve my country," Sarah replied simply, unpacking her few belongings. "And I want to prove that strength comes in many forms." Lisa nodded politely, but Sarah could see the doubt in her eyes. Everyone here had the same assumption, that military excellence required a certain look, a certain build, a certain image that Sarah simply didn't possess. That first night, as Sarah lay in her narrow bunk listening to the confident chatter of her fellow trainees, she thought about the long journey that had brought her here, years of being underestimated, of having her capabilities questioned before anyone bothered to test them. But she also thought about the countless hours she had spent in preparation, the sacrifices she had made, and the burning determination that had never wavered despite all the mockery. The thick glasses that everyone mocked were necessary, yes, but they also represented something more. They were a reminder that she saw the world differently, that she noticed details others missed, that she had learned to compensate for perceived weakness by developing extraordinary strengths in other areas. Tomorrow would bring their first real tests, and Sarah knew the jokes would only get worse before they got better. But she had a secret that none of her fellow trainees suspected, something that would eventually turn their laughter into stunned silence. For now, though, she was content to let them underestimate her. In her experience, that was always the first step toward proving them wrong. The alarm pierced the dormitory darkness at 0500 hours sharp. Sarah was already awake, having spent years conditioning herself to rise before dawn. Around her, the other trainees groaned and stumbled out of their bunks, their confidence from the previous day replaced by the harsh reality of military routine. "Move it, move it, move it," Sergeant Rodriguez's voice thundered through the barracks. "You have exactly 4 minutes to be dressed and in formation." Sarah slipped on her glasses and was dressed within 2 minutes, standing at attention while her roommates frantically searched for missing socks and struggled with their bootlaces. The early morning mountain air was crisp and thin, making some of the trainees gasp as they lined up outside. "Today we separate the wheat from the chaff," Rodriguez announced, pacing in front of the formation. "Physical training starts now. First up, a 5-mile run through the mountain trails. Anyone who can't keep up gets recycled to next month's class." The group began to move, and immediately Sarah found herself toward the back of the pack. Jake and Marcus set a punishing pace at the front, their long legs eating up the rocky terrain with ease. Behind Sarah, a few other trainees were already struggling with the altitude. "Hey, Four Eyes," Jake called back during the second mile. "Maybe you should have brought a seeing eye dog for this course." His friends laughed between heavy breaths. Sarah didn't respond. She had learned long ago that the best answer to mockery was silence and persistence. Her glasses fogged slightly in the cold mountain air, but her breathing remained steady. While others were already showing signs of fatigue, she maintained her pace with mechanical precision. By the third mile, something interesting began to happen. Several of the early pace setters were slowing down significantly. The thin air at altitude was taking its toll on even the most athletic recruits. Marcus stopped completely to vomit beside the trail, while others began walking portions of the course. Sarah, however, continued her steady rhythm. One by one, she began passing struggling trainees. Her slight frame, which everyone had seen as a disadvantage, actually required less oxygen at this altitude. Years of careful conditioning had prepared her cardiovascular system for exactly these conditions. "How is she doing that?" gasped Lisa, who had fallen back considerably from her initial position near the front. By the fourth mile, Sarah had moved into the top third of the group. The jokes had stopped entirely as the other trainees focused on simply finishing the course. Jake was now walking more than running, his face red with exertion and embarrassment. During the weapons training that followed the run, Sarah's performance continued to surprise. While others struggled to hold their rifles steady after the exhausting run, her hands remained remarkably stable. Her first shot hit dead center of the target at 300 meters. "Lucky shot," muttered Jake, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah's next 9 shots formed a tight cluster around the bullseye. The range instructor, Staff Sergeant Kim, raised an eyebrow and walked over to examine her target more closely. "Outstanding marksmanship, Chen," Kim said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father taught me, Sergeant," Sarah replied simply. He was a competitive shooter before he joined the military. The other trainees exchanged glances. This quiet girl with the thick glasses was not what she appeared to be. During the tactical exercises that afternoon, she demonstrated an uncanny ability to spot enemy positions that others missed entirely, calling out targets with precision that impressed even the instructors. "She's got eyes like a hawk," one trainee whispered to another. "Those glasses aren't making her weak. They're making her deadly accurate." As evening approached and the exhausted group gathered for dinner, the dynamic had subtly shifted. The open mockery had stopped, replaced by curious glances and whispered speculation. Sarah ate her meal quietly, aware of the attention but focused on the challenges still ahead. Jake approached her table hesitantly. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching respect. "That was some pretty impressive shooting today." "Thank you," she replied politely, not making a big deal of his change in attitude. "Where exactly did you train before coming here?" he asked. Sarah looked up at him through her glasses, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Oh, here and there," she said mysteriously. "You'll find out more as training continues." That night, as the trainees settled into their bunks, the conversations were different. Instead of jokes about the girl with glasses, there were serious discussions about her unexpected skills. Some began to wonder what other surprises Sarah Chen might be hiding, and why someone with her obvious abilities had chosen to remain so quiet about her background. Week 3 brought the advanced tactical training exercises, and with them, more surprises from the quiet trainee everyone had initially dismissed. Sarah stood at the edge of a steep cliff, examining a rope descent course that had several other recruits openly nervous. "This is a 200-foot rappel down a sheer rock face," announced Captain Martinez, the advanced tactics instructor. "Weather conditions are deteriorating. Visibility is limited, and you'll need to navigate around several obstacles on your way down." This exercise has ended military careers before they even started. Marcus peered over the edge and stepped back quickly, his face pale. "That's practically straight down," he whispered to Jake. "I can barely see the bottom through this fog." The thick mountain mist had rolled in during the morning, reducing visibility to just a few feet in any direction. Most of the trainees were squinting through the gray curtain, trying to make out the landing zone far below. Sarah, meanwhile, was methodically checking her equipment with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Chen, you're up first," Captain Martinez called out. Several trainees exchanged worried glances. Sending the girl with glasses down first seemed almost cruel, especially in these conditions. Jake started to speak up, perhaps to suggest someone else go first, but Sarah was already stepping into her harness. "Roger that, sir," she replied crisply, adjusting her glasses and moving to the cliff edge without hesitation. What happened next left everyone speechless. Sarah didn't hesitate, didn't look nervous, didn't show any of the fear that was clearly visible on the faces of her supposedly more capable classmates. Instead, she backed over the edge with practiced ease and began descending at a speed that made the instructors take notice. "Jesus," breathed Lisa, watching Sarah's form disappear into the mist. "She's moving like she's done this 1,000 times. Through her radio headset, they could hear Sarah calling out obstacles and navigation points with precision that seemed impossible given the limited visibility. Protruding rock formation at 50 feet, compensating left. Equipment cache visible at 80 feet. Marking position for recovery team. Landing zone approach looks clear from 120 feet. Captain Martinez was recording her performance times and his expression grew increasingly interested. Sarah completed the descent in less than half the time typically required for this course, and her technique was flawless throughout. When the fog cleared enough for the other trainees to see the bottom of the cliff, Sarah was already unhooked from her equipment and signaling the all clear. Her landing had been textbook perfect, executed in conditions that would challenge experienced soldiers. How did she even see where she was going? Marcus asked incredulously as he prepared for his own descent, which took nearly 3 times as long and included 2 minor equipment tangles. During the debrief session that afternoon, Captain Martinez pulled Sarah aside.
"Chen, I need to know your background."
"That wasn't beginner's luck out there. I've had some experience with mountaineering, sir," Sarah replied modestly. "Some experience?" Martinez pressed. "You handled that descent like a special operations veteran. Where exactly did you train?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "My mother was a professional mountain rescue coordinator, sir. I grew up training on peaks across 3 different mountain ranges. By the time I was 16, I was certified for high-altitude rescue operations." This revelation sent shockwaves through the training company. The quiet girl who everyone had assumed was out of her depth had actually been raised in some of the most challenging mountain environments in the world. Her thick glasses weren't a liability. They corrected vision that had been trained to spot details at extreme distances and in challenging conditions. During the evening meal, Sarah found herself surrounded by curious classmates for the first time since arriving at the program. The questions came rapidly. How many mountains had she climbed? What was the highest altitude she had reached? Had she ever participated in actual rescue missions? "I prefer not to talk about past achievements," Sarah said diplomatically. "We're all here to learn and grow together." But Jake wasn't ready to let it go. "Come on, Sarah, we've all been honest about our backgrounds. I played college football. Marcus was a state champion wrestler. Lisa ran track. What aren't you telling us?" Sarah looked around the table at the expectant faces. These people who had mocked her just weeks ago were now hanging on her every word, waiting to understand how they had so completely misjudged her capabilities. "Well," she said slowly, "I suppose you could say I've spent most of my life preparing for environments exactly like this one. My family believed that true strength comes from understanding your limitations and then systematically overcoming them." She gestured to her glasses. "Everyone sees these as a weakness, but they've taught me to be more observant, more careful, more precise than someone who relies purely on natural vision. When you have to work harder to see clearly, you learn to see more clearly than everyone else." The table fell silent as her classmates processed this perspective. For the first time, they began to understand that their assumptions about strength, capability, and military potential might have been fundamentally flawed from the very beginning. By week 6, the training program had eliminated nearly a third of the original candidates. The remaining trainees had formed tight bonds forged through shared hardship, and the group dynamics had shifted dramatically from those early days of mockery and assumption. Sarah sat in the briefing room as Colonel Hayes outlined their next major challenge. "This week begins your team leadership rotations. Each of you will take turns commanding a squad through increasingly complex tactical scenarios. Your performance as both leader and follower will determine who advances to the final mountain elimination course." The assignments were posted on the wall, and Sarah found her name listed as team leader for a hostage rescue simulation, one of the most complex exercises in the program. Her squad members included Jake, Marcus, Lisa, and 3 other trainees who had consistently performed in the top tier. Jake approached her after the briefing. "Look, Sarah, no offense, but leading a tactical assault isn't like climbing mountains or shooting targets. This requires commanding respect under pressure, making split-second decisions that could get people killed in real combat." "I understand your concerns," Sarah replied calmly. "What specific aspects of leadership do you think I need to work on?" Her response caught Jake off guard. He had expected defensiveness or anger, not a genuine request for feedback. "Well, I mean, you're so quiet all the time. How are we supposed to follow someone who barely speaks above a whisper?" "That's fair criticism," Sarah acknowledged. "However, I'd like you to consider that effective leadership isn't always about being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's about listening carefully, observing everything, and then making the right decision at the right moment." The next morning, Sarah's team gathered for mission planning. The scenario involved a terrorist cell holding hostages in a multi-story building with multiple entry points, armed guards, and civilian casualties to consider. Previous teams had struggled with this exercise, and 2 squad leaders had failed completely when their plans fell apart under pressure. Sarah spread out the architectural drawings and reconnaissance photos, studying them with intense concentration. Her teammates watched nervously as she remained silent for several long minutes, her eyes moving systematically across every detail. "Okay," she finally said, her voice quiet but clear. "Here's what we're going to do." What followed was the most detailed and comprehensive tactical briefing any of them had ever heard. Sarah had identified defensive positions that other teams had missed, spotted potential civilian hiding spots that needed to be cleared, and developed contingency plans for at least 6 different scenarios that could go wrong during the operation. "Marcus, your wrestling background makes you perfect for close-quarters combat if we encounter resistance in the stairwells," she explained. "Jake, your size and speed put you on point for the initial breach. Lisa, your track experience means you're our fastest runner. You'll coordinate communications between teams." Each assignment was clearly thought out, playing to individual strengths rather than following standard tactical doctrine. Sarah had spent the previous evening studying every team member's file, understanding their backgrounds and capabilities in ways that even they hadn't considered. During the actual exercise, Sarah's leadership style became even more apparent. While previous squad leaders had shouted orders and tried to control every movement, Sarah positioned herself where she could observe the entire operation and provided calm, precise guidance through their radio headsets. "Marcus, hostile movement on your left second-floor window." Her voice came through clearly. "Jake, hold position for 30 seconds. Then proceed to the north stairwell." Her teammates began to realize that Sarah's thick glasses weren't just for seeing distant targets. They were part of an entire system of observation and analysis that allowed her to process complex tactical situations with remarkable clarity. She seemed to see everything, anticipate problems before they developed, and coordinate multiple moving parts with the precision of a chess master. The exercise concluded with a flawless hostage rescue. 0 civilian casualties, all terrorists neutralized, and every team member accounted for and uninjured. The observing instructors were visibly impressed, and Colonel Hayes made notes throughout the entire operation. "Outstanding performance, Chen," he told her during the debrief. "Your tactical planning was comprehensive, your execution was flawless, and your team coordination was textbook perfect." "Where did you learn to analyze complex scenarios like that?" "My mother didn't just teach mountain rescue, sir," Sarah explained. "She also coordinated multi-agency disaster response operations. I grew up watching her manage situations involving dozens of moving parts, uncertain conditions, and life-or-death decisions." Jake shook his head in amazement. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. A big one. I thought leadership meant being tough and loud and intimidating, but watching you work today, I realize I don't know anything about real leadership." "We all have different strengths," Sarah replied diplomatically. "The best teams find ways to use everyone's capabilities effectively." That evening, word of Sarah's exceptional leadership performance spread throughout the training company. The quiet girl with thick glasses had not only survived the program, but was emerging as one of its most capable candidates. The final mountain elimination course was still weeks away, but everyone now understood that Sarah Chen was someone to watch very carefully. Week 10 arrived with an ominous announcement that sent ripples of anxiety through the remaining trainees. Only 18 candidates remained from the original 35, and they were about to face their final preparation for the legendary 4,600-meter elimination course. In 72 hours, you will begin the most challenging test in military training, Colonel Hayes announced during the morning briefing. The mountain elimination course has a completion rate of less than 20%. Most candidates who fail don't just wash out of this program. They leave questioning whether they belong in military service at all. Sarah sat quietly in the front row, her notebook filling with precise diagrams and notes while other trainees shifted nervously in their seats. The details Hayes shared were sobering. 48 hours of continuous operation, extreme weather conditions, minimal supplies, and challenges that would test every skill they had learned over the past 10 weeks. The course begins at base camp and ascends to 4,600 meters above sea level, Hayes continued. You'll face navigation challenges in whiteout conditions, technical climbing sections that require ropes and specialized equipment, survival scenarios with limited food and water, and combat simulations against experienced Special Forces personnel acting as enemy combatants. Marcus raised his hand. Sir, what's the longest anyone has ever taken to complete the course? 47 hours and 18 minutes, Hayes replied grimly. That candidate barely survived and required medical evacuation immediately upon completion. The course is designed to find your absolute breaking point and then push you beyond it. During the preparation period that followed, Sarah's approach differed markedly from her classmates. While others focused on physical conditioning and equipment checks, she spent hours studying topographical maps, weather patterns, and historical data from previous elimination courses. Jake found her in the library at midnight, surrounded by meteorological reports and altitude sickness research papers. Sarah, you should be sleeping. We need all our strength for what's coming. Knowledge is strength, she replied without looking up from a detailed analysis of wind patterns at high altitude. Physical preparation only gets you so far. Understanding the environment and conditions gives you the edge that makes the difference between success and failure. Her systematic preparation caught the attention of the instructors as well. Captain Martinez discovered Sarah conducting solo practice runs through simulated navigation courses, timing herself under different visibility conditions and testing various equipment configurations. Chen, you're pushing yourself pretty hard for the preliminary exercises, he observed. I'm not practicing, sir, Sarah corrected politely. I'm calibrating. Everyone assumes the elimination course is about endurance and willpower, but it's really about precision and efficiency. The candidates who fail waste energy through poor planning, inadequate preparation, or emotional decision-making under stress. Martinez was intrigued. And you think your approach will be different? I think my approach already has been different, sir. Everyone else is training their bodies. I've been training my decision-making processes. 2 days before the elimination course, Sarah made an announcement that surprised her remaining classmates. She gathered them together after evening meal and spoke with unusual directness. I want to share something with all of you before we begin the final test, she said. You've all been wondering about my background, making assumptions about my capabilities, trying to figure out how someone who looks like me ended up competing with athletes and warriors. The group listened intently. Even after 10 weeks of training together, Sarah remained somewhat mysterious about her past. My mother wasn't just a mountain rescue coordinator, Sarah continued. She was the first woman to complete the military's extreme environment survival program. My father wasn't just a competitive shooter. He was a sniper instructor for Special Operations Forces. She paused, letting this information sink in. I've been training for environments like the elimination course since I was 8 years old. Not because I wanted to join the military, but because my parents believed that true strength comes from systematic preparation and the ability to perform under conditions that break other people. Lisa was the first to speak. Why didn't you tell us this from the beginning? Because I wanted to earn your respect through my actions, not my family history, Sarah replied. And because I learned long ago that being underestimated can be a significant tactical advantage. Jake shook his head slowly. So all this time when we were making jokes about your glasses and wondering if you could handle the pressure, you were actually the most qualified person here? Not the most qualified, Sarah corrected, but perhaps the most specifically prepared for what we're about to face. Each of you brings unique strengths that I don't possess. The elimination course will test all of us in ways we can't fully anticipate. That night, as the trainees made their final preparations, the atmosphere was charged with nervous energy and newfound respect for the quiet young woman who had systematically dismantled every assumption they had made about military capability and leadership potential. Tomorrow would determine who had the combination of skills, preparation, and mental toughness to join the elite ranks of those who had conquered the legendary mountain elimination course. But for the first time since arriving at the training facility, every candidate understood that appearances could be profoundly deceiving, and that true strength often came in forms they had never expected to encounter. At 0400 hours on a frigid Tuesday morning, 18 candidates stood at the base of the mountain that would determine their military futures. Snow was falling steadily, and the wind carried the promise of the brutal conditions waiting at higher elevations. Sarah adjusted her glasses one final time, checking that her backup pair was secure in her pack. The other trainees looked nervous, some pacing to manage their anxiety, others making last-minute equipment adjustments. She remained still and focused, her breathing steady despite the thin air. "Candidates," Colonel Hayes called out through the swirling snow, "the elimination course begins now. You have your individual route assignments, your emergency communication devices, and your minimal survival supplies. From this point forward, you are on your own until you reach the summit checkpoint or activate your emergency beacon." The route cards were distributed randomly, ensuring that each candidate would face unique challenges and couldn't simply follow someone else's path. Sarah opened hers and quickly memorized the waypoints, a series of coordinates that would take her through some of the most treacherous terrain the mountain offered. One by one, the candidates departed at 15-minute intervals. Sarah was assigned departure position 14, which gave her time to observe the weather patterns and note how the earlier candidates approached the initial ascent. When her turn came, she shouldered her pack and set off into the white wilderness with characteristic quietness. Behind her, Jake called out, "Good luck, Sarah." She raised one gloved hand in acknowledgement but didn't turn around. Every ounce of energy and concentration would be needed for what lay ahead. The first 6 hours tested navigation skills as the candidates climbed through dense forest in deteriorating visibility. Sarah's systematic preparation paid immediate dividends. While others struggled with map reading in the blowing snow, she moved with confident precision, following compass bearings and natural landmarks that remained visible even in near whiteout conditions. At the 3,200-meter checkpoint, she encountered Marcus, who was sitting in the snow looking defeated. His lips were blue with cold and he was fumbling with his equipment. "Sarah," he called weakly, "I think I'm lost. My compass readings don't match the terrain." She knelt beside him and quickly assessed his condition. Mild hypothermia was setting in, and his decision-making was becoming compromised. "Marcus, you need to activate your emergency beacon. This isn't worth risking your life." "But I'll wash out of the program," he protested. "You'll wash out permanently if you die up here," Sarah replied firmly. "There's no shame in recognizing when conditions exceed your preparation level." She helped him activate his emergency locator and waited until the rescue helicopter response confirmed his signal before continuing her own ascent. The delay cost her nearly an hour, but she knew that leaving a fellow candidate in danger would have been unthinkable. The technical climbing section began at 3,800 meters, where candidates faced a series of rock faces and ice walls that required advanced mountaineering skills. Sarah's childhood training with her mother became invaluable as she navigated routes that would have challenged professional climbers. Through her radio headset, she could hear the distress calls of other candidates. Jake had encountered equipment failure during a crucial rappel. Lisa was suffering severe altitude sickness and had activated her beacon. One by one, the candidate pool was shrinking under the mountain's relentless pressure. At 4,200 meters, Sarah reached the survival challenge section. Here, candidates were required to spend 4 hours in a simulated emergency shelter with minimal supplies, while temperatures dropped to life-threatening levels. Her glasses fogged constantly in the extreme cold, but she had trained for exactly these conditions. While other candidates burned through their limited fuel supplies trying to stay warm, Sarah used techniques her parents had taught her years ago. She built an efficient snow cave that captured and reflected body heat, rationed her energy consumption, and maintained core body temperature through controlled movement exercises. The combat simulation began at dawn on the second day. Sarah had been moving for over 30 hours with minimal rest, but her pace remained steady while exhaustion began to claim other candidates. Professional military personnel acting as enemy forces were positioned throughout the final approach to test tactical skills under extreme fatigue. Sarah's approach to this section demonstrated why her methodical preparation had been so important. Instead of trying to overpower or outrun the opposing forces, she used patience and observation to identify patterns in their patrol routes, finding gaps in their coverage that allowed her to advance undetected. Her thick glasses, which had been the source of so much mockery months ago, proved to be crucial equipment for spotting camouflaged positions and movement at distances that challenged even experienced soldiers at this altitude. As she approached the final ascent to the 4,600-meter summit, Sarah could see two other candidates ahead of her, moving slowly but steadily toward the finish line. The wind was howling now, and visibility was reduced to just a few meters in any direction. Every step required tremendous effort in the oxygen-thin air, but Sarah's breathing remained controlled and efficient. Her systematic training had prepared her cardiovascular system for exactly these demands, while her mental preparation kept her focused on the immediate task rather than the overwhelming scope of the challenge. The summit checkpoint appeared through the swirling snow like a mirage, a small shelter with emergency supplies and communication equipment, where successful candidates could finally rest and call for extraction. Sarah approached it with steady determination, knowing that she was about to join a very exclusive group of military personnel. Sarah reached the summit checkpoint at 13:47 hours on her second day, her legs trembling with exhaustion but her mind clear and focused. The small shelter offered blessed relief from the howling wind, and she collapsed onto a bench inside, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the magnitude of what she had accomplished. Two other candidates were already there. Thompson, a former Navy SEAL, and Rodriguez, an Army Ranger with multiple combat deployments. Both men looked at her with expressions of profound respect and amazement. "Unbelievable," Thompson said, shaking his head. "I've never seen anyone navigate that technical climbing section with that level of precision." "And you helped rescue Marcus on the way up?" "Anyone would have done the same," Sarah replied modestly, though her voice was hoarse from the cold and exertion. The checkpoint supervisor, a grizzled Special Forces veteran named Sergeant Major Williams, entered the shelter carrying hot soup and communication equipment. "Congratulations, Chen. You've just completed one of the finest performances we've ever recorded on this course." As Sarah sipped the life-giving warmth of the soup, Williams continued his debrief. "Your time of 36 hours and 14 minutes places you in the top 3 fastest completions in the course's history. But more importantly, your tactical decision-making under extreme stress, your navigation accuracy in impossible conditions, and your willingness to risk your own success to help a fellow candidate, that's the kind of character we're looking for in elite military personnel." Over the next several hours, the other successful candidates trickled in. Jake arrived 4 hours later, barely conscious but determined to finish. Lisa had been evacuated due to severe altitude sickness but would recover fully. Of the original 18 candidates who started the elimination course, only 7 completed it successfully. The helicopter extraction came at dawn on the third day, carrying the exhausted but triumphant survivors back to base camp. Sarah stared out the window at the mountain that had tested every aspect of her preparation, grateful for the parents who had taught her that strength came in many forms. Back at the training facility, the completion ceremony was held in the main auditorium. Family members, military officials, and previous program graduates gathered to honor the new members of this elite brotherhood. Sarah's parents sat in the front row, their faces glowing with quiet pride. Colonel Hayes took the stage to address the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to recognize 7 exceptional individuals who have demonstrated the highest levels of military capability, leadership potential, and personal character." He called each graduate forward individually, presenting them with their completion certificates and insignia. When Sarah's name was called, the applause was thunderous. Her fellow trainees, including those who had washed out during the course, stood and cheered for the quiet young woman who had systematically proven every assumption wrong. Sarah Chen, Colonel Hayes announced, not only completed the elimination course with distinction, but achieved the third fastest time in the course's 40-year history. Her performance demonstrates that military excellence comes in many forms, and that our nation's security depends on recognizing and nurturing talent wherever we find it. After the ceremony, guests were invited to tour the facility's Hall of Honor, where the achievements of distinguished graduates were commemorated. Sarah walked quietly through the displays with her parents, overwhelmed by the magnitude of joining such an elite group. Near the end of the hall, she stopped in front of a new plaque that had been installed just that morning. Her mother gasped softly, and her father placed a proud hand on Sarah's shoulder. The brass plaque was simple and elegant, reading, 4,600-meter elimination course, outstanding performance recognition, Sarah Chen, 36 hours, 14 minutes, world's best female performance. As Sarah stood reading her own name on the wall, she heard familiar voices approaching from behind. Jake, Marcus, and several other trainees from her original class were walking through the hall with their families, pointing out various displays and sharing stories from their training experience. And that's where they put the plaques for the elimination course records, Jake was explaining to his parents. Only the most exceptional performances get recognized here. Most people who complete the course are just happy to survive it. Marcus spotted Sarah standing in front of the newest addition to the wall. "Hey guys, come look at this," he called out. They already installed Sarah's plaque. The group gathered around reading the inscription with growing amazement. Jake's father, a retired Marine colonel, whistled softly. World's best female performance? That's not just facility recognition. That's an international military record. "Sarah," Jake said quietly, "I need to ask you something I should have asked months ago. When we were making jokes about your glasses on that first day, did you already know you were going to do this?" Sarah turned to face the group that had become her military family over the past months of training. Her thick glasses caught the light from the overhead fixtures, no longer a source of mockery but a symbol of the unique perspective that had carried her to this extraordinary achievement. "I knew I was going to give everything I had," she replied honestly. "But I didn't know if it would be enough. The mountain doesn't care about your preparation or your family background or your determination. It only cares whether you can perform when everything is on the line." Lisa, who had recovered from her altitude sickness and was present for the ceremony, despite not completing the course, stepped forward. "Sarah, I want to apologize for all of us. We spent so much time looking at what we thought made you different that we missed what actually made you exceptional." "You don't need to apologize," Sarah said gently. "We all make assumptions based on limited information. The important thing is that we learn to see past those assumptions and work together as a team." Colonel Hayes approached the group, having overheard their conversation. "Chen, I have some additional news that wasn't announced during the ceremony. Based on your elimination course performance and your overall training record, you've been selected for immediate assignment to our most elite Special Operations Unit." The gathered trainees fell silent. Assignment to Special Operations directly from the training program was almost unheard of. Most candidates required years of additional experience and training. "Furthermore," Hayes continued, "you've been requested specifically for a high-altitude rescue and reconnaissance unit. Your unique combination of mountaineering expertise, tactical skills, and leadership capability fills a critical need in our special operations community." Sarah's parents exchanged glances, recognizing that their daughter's military career was taking a trajectory they had hoped for but never dared expect. All those years of training in harsh mountain conditions, all the patience with mockery and underestimation, had led to this moment of recognition and opportunity. As the group dispersed and families began to leave the facility, Sarah remained for a few more minutes in front of her plaque. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new teammates who might initially underestimate her, and new opportunities to prove that strength and capability came in forms that couldn't be judged by appearances alone. Jake approached her one final time before leaving. "Sarah, I learned more from training with you than from all my previous athletic experiences combined. You taught me that real strength isn't about looking strong. It's about being strong when it matters most." Sarah smiled, adjusting her glasses one last time before walking toward the exit. "And you taught me that people can change their minds when presented with new evidence. That's a valuable lesson for anyone in military service." Outside, the mountain peaks rose majestically against the evening sky, no longer a source of intimidation, but a reminder of what could be accomplished through preparation, determination, and the courage to prove that everyone's assumptions about strength and capability could be completely wrong. The girl with the thick glasses had become the soldier with the world record, and her real adventures were just beginning.